my name's Jade and today I'm going to be talking about the books I read in July. I read 4, maybe if you're going to count it, 5 books in July. It was a pretty slow month and I can tell you why. I went on a trip at the very beginning of the month and I read like a quarter of Red, A Natural History of the Redhead by Jackie Collins Harvey, and then the week I came back I continued reading it and I got about halfway through and then I've had to table it because it was taking me so long to get through it. And I was also halfway through a book before July and then I finished it this month, but I was taking notes while I was reading it, so it was taking a really long time to get through it. And I'm also halfway through Twilight Cities by Catherine Pangonis. Non-fiction, it looks like it takes me at least 2 weeks to read, and I read like 3, like at least halves of non-fiction books this month, so it slowed down my reading a lot. Plus just like the trip in general, I wasn't reading that week really. But I did read some books and so we're going to talk about them today. Before I get into those books though, I do quickly want to talk about Untethered Sky, which I actually read in June, but I finished it after I filmed the wrap up. So I'm going to talk about it now. This one is by Fonda Lee, who wrote the Jade Wars, Jade City. I don't actually know the name of the trilogy, I just know the books, which have a lot of hype and I do want to get into them. I thought this one could be a good intro to Fonda Lee. It's a novella. I listened to it via audiobook and it's narrated by Nikki Masood, and her narration was great. I thought this was like a prequel type situation to a new series. It felt very standalone, unless it's just like prepped for the world. I'm not sure. I thought it was like an intro to a new series and that's part of the reason why I read it, so that I can like read the new series by her. I'm not sure if that's the case or not. You might have to fact check that because I feel like I need to fact check that now. I really liked the premise of this one. We're in a world where there are rooks, and rooks are these like giant eagle bird type things. Oh, kind of Lord of the Rings vibes. Rooks hunt manticores and manticores prey on humans, and so that's why humans started then training rooks to then hunt the manticores, and it's this like whole deal trying to be a rook trainer. And we're following our lead character and she becomes a rook trainer. She has her own history and stuff, and I'm not going to say too much on that because you can read it and find out for yourself. It's very short, so I feel like the less you say the better. I think the length worked well for this kind of story, but it did feel like it was in 2 distinct halves, just like the training section and the kind of vigor section, and then this like all of a sudden there's these time skip after time skip after time skip. So I really enjoyed that first half. I thought it was really, really strong, and then I didn't connect with the second half as much because we're just like going through the motions. It became very plot rather than character based, which is fine, but it was just too much time skips for me personally, for my tastes. My notes says that it has a lot of potential, this like world and premise, but it feels like the book was just really about these 2 creatures and then all of our characters took a backseat to that, apart from our lead who has like her baggage. I don't think that's a bad thing per se, but it didn't feel as well fleshed out as I wanted. I liked everything to feel grounded. And I like to feel like I'm really immersed in the whole thing, and if something's being held back, sometimes I can struggle with that, and so like things like time skips and characters taking backseats to these 2 kinds of creatures, which is literally, they mention the words a lot, they talk about it a lot. I just personally struggled with it because of that. I feel like it could have been a full-length novel. We like didn't have the time skips as much, and we really got like entrenched in what they were going through and the kind of the missions, and there seems to be really interesting like hierarchies in the society that could have been more delved into. I feel like it could have, if it was a full-length novel, I can see the epicness that it could have been, and I feel like I would have loved it so much more. Like I said, I think it works as a novella, I just don't love the way it was formatted and portrayed to us. I did enjoy the arc. The ending worked really well. There was something that happened at the end that was really convenient. Like, people could probably hear me rolling my eyes. Lots of potential. The second half kind of let it down for me though. Overall, it's just, it's good, it's fine. I would probably say like a 6 out of 10. Now, getting into the books that I read in July, the first book I finished was A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Murder in Ancient Rome by Emma Southon. So this is kind of what it says in the tin. Emma is like a true crime fan, I suppose, as am I. And I'm going to Rome in August, and so I've been wanting to read more literature about Rome and Romans. And this just like immediately caught my eye because of the premise. It's like true crime but ancient Rome version, and I also think it does learning about a society and the way they murder, the way they deal with death, the way they perceive death, the way they perceive crime, the way they kind of set up their society, because you know, laws against murder is very intrinsic to the way we run our society. That's, you know, one of the worst crimes out there, I suppose. On the scale of things, to our society, that's one of the worst. But then perceiving how they differ in their views, it teaches us a lot about them as people in general, which then I always think, like, learning about history reflects on us. We can then, like, compare that to ourselves and see how we got here, what that says about us. I like history. And it goes into, like, different sections, so it really kind of breaks it down. We have like murder on the Senate floor, murder in Roman law, murder in the family, in marriage, in the slave state, by magic, in the imperial house. Really breaks it down, and then each section also is broken up into 3 kind of chapters, I suppose. Emma is very, very clever. And someone says it on the back, Sarah Perry. I love this funny, scholarly, erudite, irreverent book. Emma Southern wears her learning lightly, but we never for a moment doubt her authority, and the past arrives with total immediacy from the first page. She knows a lot about like the random little things that just fill in all the gaps, and like extra side stories that aren't necessary by any means, but are entertaining and interesting nonetheless. She's in complete command the whole time. You trust her implicitly. And it is also very funnily written. I listened to this via audiobook. It was narrated by Sophie Ward, who I believe narrated Beatrice Hitchman's books. I was thinking like her voice was familiar the whole time and I couldn't put my finger on it, and then she's narrated Bee's books, so that's why. And because like she's got quite a posh voice, this narrator, and so hearing her read out like the sarcastic, rude things that Emma has written, it's just hilarious. I found it so funny. I laughed out loud many times, but it's very empathetic, it's very emotive at times. It does remind me a lot of Pandora's Jar. Pandora's Jar really, by Natalie Haynes, took me through all of the emotions, like I laughed, I cried. It was very sincere at times, very empathetic, very upsetting, and then at times it was like laugh out loud funny and silly and just making fun of these complete idiots. Completely reinterpret what could have been happening. They're both apologetically feminist and poke fun countlessly at society in general, and these idiot like upper class men who think they know everything and don't. I mean, it's a very complex subject, and she offers a wide array of interpretations. But I found it thoroughly fascinating and a complete delight to read. So I think I might give it a 10 out of 10. It sounds at all intriguing, like murder, true crime, but in ancient Rome. I highly recommend picking it up. The next up is a short story collection, and that is Midsummer Mysteries by Agatha Christie. I read Sinister Spring, the spring equivalent of this. I can't remember, in spring, I feel like it was in May. Short stories by Agatha Christie. In some way, shape or form they relate to summer. I feel like the connection to summer in this one was stronger than the connection to spring in the other one, albeit spring is kind of elusive, I suppose, especially in England where we don't really have a spring as such. It doesn't feel like it to me, at least. I didn't enjoy this one as much as Sinister Spring, I don't think. I just wasn't as invested in the stories on whole though. Like, maybe there were a couple that caught my interest. One that sticks out to me the most, funnily enough, Jane in Search of a Job. For some reason that one really like has wedged itself in my mind. The Oracle at Delphi was fun. The Raja's Emerald was fun. Poirot ones on this one I didn't love as much. Maybe that's why there wasn't as much Poirot and Maple feels like in this one as there was in the other one. And I can't really say why. I just wasn't as invested in these stories as I was to Sinister Spring. I still like it as a concept. It's still a stunning cover. I don't really know what else to say about it. I'm gonna give it on a whole maybe like a 5 out of 10. It's like pretty neutral, maybe a 5.5. Yeah. And then next up was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I've been wanting to read this since the year it came out in 2020. Like, I remember hearing about it before it even came out and I was like, I want to read that, that sounds so good. And now she has like 4 books out and I haven't read any of them. So I finally read one of them and it was such a delight. I loved it so much. I cannot wait to read the rest of her work. This is like up there for me from my rom-coms. What is her name? January. We're following January. She's a romance writer, but it kind of reminded me actually of the Dead Romantics in this. She's going through something of writer's block. She's kind of had her belief in love shaken a bit. She ends up going to her dad's old lake house to try and sell it and clear it all out and to write her book because the deadline's coming up. And across the way is none other than August Everett, who she knew from college. They were rivals in college when they were both writers. He writes very literary fiction and she writes romance fiction, and so they decide to help them like get out of their writer's block, and just as like an experiment to switch genres and like teach each other how to write the other's genre. It's funny and it's cute and it's so swoony. It's very entertaining. It's also got heart to it though, and depth to it, which I don't mean to say that like not all romance books do, but this one just in a way that I found pleasantly surprising. It's very moving and it has a very grounded portrayal of long-term love, which I found really nice. Felt very well done. I really liked the writing. Did it have predictable, slightly simplistic elements? Sure, but I feel like that's the genre, like that's purposeful. So it's hard to critique on that per se. I'm just snobby. But like I said, that's not the genre, so I need to get over that. I really liked it. I'm really tempted to give it a 9 out of 10. I don't know if that's too high, but I feel like, you know, as far as romance books go, again, putting it back in its genre and not trying to ask too much of it, it deserves a 9 out of 10. So either like an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed this one. I cannot wait to read more of her work. I also audiobooked this one, and it's narrated by Julia Whalen, who is fantastic. Kind of lastly, kind of not. I'm gonna mention another book, but I feel like it's cheating, but I'm gonna mention it to you anyway. But the last kind of full-length novel that I read this month, I suppose, is The Guest by Emma Cline. Emma Cline wrote The Girls, which I read back in 2019? I'm gonna say 2019. I feel good about that. And absolutely adored. I have yet to read Daddy, her short story collection, but I really want to. And then this year she came out with The Guest, and I didn't even know it was coming out until it was out, and I was like, oh my god, Emma Cline has a new book. I've been waiting for this for years. And this one has a really intense atmosphere too, but in a very different style. This one feels much more literary and like hard and fast. It's very short and it's very intense, but at the same time, like in terms of the plot, it feels like a lot slower and less tumultuous than The Girls. So they have very different feelings, and this one feels much more literary, whereas The Girls could kind of just be like historical fiction. I still think literary, but it has more movement and emotion and passion to it, whereas this one's just like So we're following Alex. She's gone to Long Island to spend the summer with her older boyfriend. There's a faux pas. He ends up saying like, why don't you just go back to the city for the summer? I don't want you here. But she doesn't really have anywhere else to go. Has some trouble in her past, and so she decides to linger on the island. So we're just kind of following that journey. That's all I'm gonna say. Within the first 50 pages or so, everything is explained. I've read critiques online that it's very slow, not a lot happens, there wasn't enough to hold people to it, but again, I feel like that's literary fiction. I really liked it. Again, somewhat similarly actually to what I said about Emma Southern, Cline was in complete control the whole time, like no doubt about it. Her writing was very self-assured, very cool. Her sentences were very simple, very crisp, very clean, very concise, incredibly well written. I cannot fault the writing at all. I think the characterization was done really well. They all felt super real and grounded and questionable, all of them. The themes and the questions it provokes I thought were so fascinating. I really enjoyed being along for the ride. It completely drew me in and captivated me. I was completely immersed in this world and this story. There's one thing I don't know how I feel about. I think objectively it's clever. I really don't want to say what it is because I feel like if you know this going in, then it might spoil things for you. You might be able to figure it out, so I'm going to be as elusive as possible. I'm sorry. I feel like if you've read it, you might know. Like, I don't know how else she could have done it. It's very clever. I find it hard to critique. I can't give it anything less than a 9 out of 10. It's just too well done. It's too clever. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. And then very quickly, the last book I wanted to mention, I'm counting it as having read it. I'm gonna put it into my Goodreads after filming this. Did I read it? It's open to debate. The Mousetrap by Agatha Christie. I watched the performance, and then after performance, this edition is the 70th anniversary edition, and it does have like bonus content in the back, and I have, albeit quickly, read that content. I think that's as much as close to it being fully read as it's ever gonna come, unless I like decide to reread the play someday. Such a lovely edition as well. I really enjoyed it. It's about a bunch of people being stuck in a house during a storm, and there's a murderer about. That's what I'm gonna say. It's got like a 3 blind mice theme running through, hence the title The Mousetrap, which I know Christie likes to do that with her nursery rhymes, doesn't she? She likes to put a sick and twisted spin on them. And you vaguely, a very small amount of it from the film See How They Run, which is kind of based on a mystery around a production of The Mousetrap, and the mystery is inherently linked to The Mousetrap. But it had been a while since I watched that film, so I didn't know a ton going into it, which I would recommend. The performance was really good. I really enjoyed it. I guessed part of the explanation, but I didn't guess all of it, so that was really nice. Yeah, I liked it. I liked it. I'd give it like a 7 maybe an 8 out of 10. And those are all the books that I read in July. It was, like I said, a much shorter month. So hopefully August can go out with a bang. I feel like June was a slow month as well. Come on, August, we're rooting for you. I would love to know what books you read in July, what your favourite book you read in July was. If you read any of these and you have any opinions, please let me know them in the comments section. Yeah, that is everything. I hope you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!